Hey Ankit, welcome to SigNoz launch week. How are you feeling today?
Hello, Pranay. I'm pretty excited. I'm all good. What about you?
Good as well. Looking forward to a chat. Cool. So let's get started with a quick intro about yourself. Maybe for the viewers, would be good to understand who are you, what you do at SigNoz.
Sure, Pranay. Hey, folks, I'm Ankit. I handle tech and somewhat of product at SigNoz. I have always been very much curious about this domain. This is particularly of very much interest to me. As before SigNoz, used to debug a lot of microservices, and I was very much aware of the problem, how the communication breaks when things and app requests move across microservices. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm very much excited about the domain that we're working into and the tech we are building. I am all very much stoked up for the launch week.
Awesome. It has been almost 3 years since we launched SigNoz. From a tech perspective, how has the journey been since you launched first, and then now where your like users are using you at a scale? Walk us through like how has the life changed for you?
That's an interesting question, Pranay. I'm rarely asked about this evolution of tech and scaling problems at different uh, talks and meetups. But yeah, so when we started SigNoz, I launched with a very heavy architecture, including Kafka, Druid, and all. We got a very quick feedback on folks need to try us out or the product in a quick span of 15, 20, 30 minutes. So that's what the first iteration was looking like. We brought in ClickHouse, that was lean. We removed all the processors to get things running in a small footprint of resources. Uh, the tech usually, mostly when we launched, was around getting the MVP out fast. So, like as a startup, as a company, we also need to iterate fast on the users' feedback. What we are building, does it resonate with the users? That is, make sense or not? Right. So, it started in those ways,
Yeah, I think
iterating, building the ending leaks.
those times were interesting. I think we were deciding on which columnar data store to use. We were
Yeah.
sure that we have to use a columnar data store, but we're thinking, hey, do we use Druid, do we use Pino, or do we use ClickHouse? And as far as I remember, at that time, it seemed like Druid was the most
Yeah.
stable one and like most adoption among companies. So we launched with that. But quickly we realized that for the adoption of our open source project, it's very important that the the data store runs very well in a single machine. And what we realized was that Druid needs much more resources, though it's like great columnar data store, it needs much more resources to get started. And that's why we moved to ClickHouse, and sort of the adoption started to skyrocket. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted you. Go ahead. Uh,
No
so yeah,
worries.
so you
Yes.
moved from Druid to ClickHouse, and
Right.
what next?
That was the initial major thing. Then, as we saw more and more users from different companies adopting SigNoz, they requested for a few things. So the next phase, I would say, of half a year to year was feature building, understanding the use cases, what was being underserved in the market, that like as company, as a project, we can solve better, right? So those were the things that we used to work on, so that users can get more and more value out of it. Uh, we were also looking into how the open source thing or theme was being uh, taken by the community along with the open telemetry evolution that is happening. Right, so all of it was going on together. And in fact, the most interesting thing was SigNoz was growing along with the adoption of open telemetry and ClickHouse. So that was the most interesting fact that we observed, because ClickHouse was not all that famous when we started first using it. So it has also gained a drastic or dramatic popularity in the last couple of years, along with OpenTelemetry,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think one thing which I realized that being an open source project provides you is that it gives you a lot of feedback from your community, which is for a general like closed source product is much difficult to get. So I think that was a blessing for us that our community was quite active, and if we ship a feature which was not up to the mark or was not doing what we expected it to do, we'd quickly get feedbacks in a Slack that hey, this is not working. I
Right.
think it's just pushed us to shift features much faster and iterate much faster. Um, so yeah, how has your experience been building an open source project, right? Because there's a lot more stakeholders you have, which you have like you
Right.
have a community, you have users, and then you have paying customers, and sometimes that can be very demanding, especially. And I look into a Slack that there are like many questions out there. So how has your experience been doing that?
All right. So overall, as a concept wise, I love things being open source, especially around uh, that course or technologies or the product that is very core to the company, right? So this is something we directly fit in. And the feedback from the community, as I said, like as you said, like it has been phenomenal. So definitely there was a great rush to uh, build the right product, build it out fast, get their feedback and all. But yeah, so open source definitely made a lot of sense when we started building it out. Um, I would say apart from just the stakeholders around the customers and the users, there have been a couple of other bets that we have already taken, like one being open telemetry, right? So a lot of times our bandwidth used to go into looking into the open telemetry specifications. How is open
Yeah,
telemetry doing? What are the new projects? How mature are they? How frequently we need to upgrade our dependency package? And the same happened with ClickHouse too. ClickHouse also matured a lot during our journey. We had to frequently sometimes upgrade ClickHouse. Sometimes we occurred with bugs that we knew that was in the upstream, the performance improvement, degradations. Like it was like we were living together with all the three projects together. It was never SigNoz alone, I would say.
yeah, yeah. And interesting that you mentioned open telemetry. We have seen a lot of adoption around open telemetry. When we started, it was a very early bet because we didn't want to build our own proprietary SDK, and also open telemetry seemed to be the right approach to do things because you like as developers, at least to me, it makes sense that the code which you put for instrumentation in your application code should not be proprietary, right?
Right.
So how has the project grown? I think it has grown rapidly, but from a technical perspective, what are the key areas where you have seen it mature, the open telemetry project? And also, what do you see, why open telemetry is the future, right? I think we talk a lot about open telemetry being the where people are gravitating towards as an instrumentation and standard. Why is that the future? What are the like take us through some uh,
Right.
technical points on like why is that the case?
Right. Um, let's say if we start thinking at the basics, I would say, uh, just think about any bigger changes in the code base that you're doing, right? We as tech, we never want it to be a proprietary software or a thing that can only be controlled by an org. And like that is the basic building block of the text. Like we want control, the more and more of it, so that we can control, we can tweak around, we can change, we can keep things in house. Like different things can attribute to the reasonings of why we want to have an open source or sourced SDKs or data generation in general, right? So open telemetry should have been is like the native uh, outcome of data being generated from an application, right? I would say it. I am surprised in the other way around that it has not been like it took us so late to be here at that's this point that open telemetry is getting famous. It should have been much earlier. Right? Having said that, seems to be the native way and all. OpenTelemetry gives a huge advantage to the end users where they can just instrument it once and forget about which vendor, which technology to use at their backend to analyze the data and all, right? But in all, I would say OpenTelemetry's journey has been great. We have seen logs to mature a lot. It still has to go uh, a longer way to get more and more adoption. But I have seen organizations like big and small uh, getting adopted to OpenTelemetry in their company, right? And even now today, like every smaller company or even seed funded startup, like a team of 5, 6, 7 people, if they have to get started into observability, they start using OpenTelemetry, right? So that's like
Yeah,
one
I think
part of
that
it,
has
I would
been
say.
that has been something which was sort of surprising to me, because I
Yeah,
expected people in bigger companies to invest in open telemetry, because that's when vendor neutrality, future proofness makes sense, like starts becoming more and more important. But what I realized, like, and we have like some very good users using, like, very early stage companies using open telemetry and SigNoz, was that generally the the leader in these companies have come from a team which has implemented observability solutions, gone through the journey that what happens if you put proprietary SDKs, how you get sort of squeezed by sort of getting embedded with one particular vendor, and they realize that, hey, in my next project or next product, I don't want to get constrained by this, right? And that's why I
right,
think we are seeing even early stage companies starting with open telemetry, and we also run this APAC open telemetry end user group. And one of the things which we find is that people are very comfortable instrumenting their code with open telemetry SDKs, even doing manual instrumentation, because they know that this is now a fixed SDK, and
and it's
like
like a one-time
what they
job, man,
put
right?
to, yeah, yeah, it's like a one time
Right,
job. So this was actually quite interesting to me, that people are like, even smaller companies, early stage startups who have just started to think about observability, are starting with open telemetry, even though it's like may not be the as mature as like some of the proprietary SDKs, but if it's 80% there, and that's sometimes good enough for people to get started with. So that has been quite interesting, even
right.
from looking from outside, right?
Right. Even I would say it just does not get limited to that. OpenTelemetry has enabled plethora of more use cases that can like help early different kinds of stages of a company in software development lifecycle and all. A few companies that I have gone through is like one is like Trace Test. uh, what they do is they can pick up your distributed trace. They know how the request is traveling through different services, and they can generate tests in your applications based on and that flow of the request. Right. So that's pretty interesting. Another is Trace Loop that does observability for your LLM applications. Like they will help you understand what is going right, what is going wrong, which prompts are working fine, which are prompts are giving you different expected output. So, right, this input output expectation matching can also be done via OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, and if think about that, I think this should become more and more prevalent, because open telemetry is standardizing the data format in which these codes emit data. And once
Yeah,
you have standardized data format, you can build more and more tooling around it, right? Because you know that, okay, this is where the format which data would be in. So how do we analyze it in different way? So I think the projects which you mentioned are just maybe a start, and we'll see much
starting.
more
Yeah,
uh,
right.
community adoption and new projects and innovation happening there. So which is which I think is exciting. I think it would unlock a lot of value for customers and
Right.
users.
So what I see going forward is like in the next 2 to 3 years, every other open source core software or tool that is being made will have to emit data because like inherently you have to observe that system, that tool, and that data is going to be in the OpenTelemetry format, right? So I have seen that to happen for traffic. Like they had to, they started emitting data in OpenTelemetry format. Later, when we, as SigNoz, we want something else to monitor SigNoz, we will be emitting data in the OpenTelemetry native format, right? That's just an example. So more and more of this expansion in the in the use cases of OpenTelemetry is going to happen very soon.
Yeah, fair enough. And what do you see, like how has OpenTelemetry enabled correlation across different signals? Because at SigNoz, we talk a lot about uh, being able to support multiple signals for observability, like logs, traces, and metrics. How do you think that helps customers? And why is that important? And maybe what is the role of OpenTelemetry in that?
Right. So I would say that is also very much intuitive. Uh, uh, as OpenTelemetry gets more and more adopted, because OpenTelemetry is a single pane of data generation semantics for all of metrics, traces, and logs, right? But there has to be a single pane of observation, a window where you can say, or tool where you can see all the data coming in and you can do all sorts of analysis and all. I would say let's think about in somewhat other way also, right? Now today, let's say we have metrics, traces, and logs. We already have some maturity for profiling for events, right? So now there are 5 signals. When, and let's say every one of these signals is instrumented by OpenTelemetry, and you need to use a different tool for analyzing each of these signals, right? So that is going to be a lot of painful to run each of these backend analysis tool for each of these signal at your backend at scale, right? And like it does not make very natural intuitive sense to run all these systems at scale uh, at your back, right? And think about like you are running this in your infra and you're not up for any SaaS tool that does all of that for you. You are doing it in-house, on-prem, due to security compliance or any other or data governance regulations or anything else. You plan to have things in-house. Now imagine you're running those 5 6 different systems in-house to get the complete observability landscape into you. So that's where like it becomes very important to have a single tool as much as possible, so that you can get a better understanding of the different signals in the same place. uh, and like correlation obviously comes as an, like I would say, collateral and different things to enjoy a cherry on the top things out of that system. Let's say you have metrics incoming, you saw something going haywire in some system or some application, you just jump on to traces from there. You can go to logs from that of those applications of that host, because OpenTelemetry gives you a standard set of semantics or attributes that you can use to correlate between different signals, right? So that is like a golden advantage that we get from OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, I think the resource attributes piece in OpenTelemetry is quite interesting because it generates attributes from where the data is being generated in a unified format, and that gets propagated across different signals, right? So the same resource attributes
Yeah.
goes to trace, the same resource attributes goes to logs, and the same goes to metrics. I think what that enables is exactly the point which you're saying, which like correlation across multiple signals much easy. So you can go from logs or traces and see what are the resource attributes there, and just be able to, for example, you want to see logs which were fired by a particular node from which the traces were served, right? And I think we
Yeah.
have some features around this on SigNoz also, where You can correlate across your resource attributes, be able to see, go from your traces to logs and see exactly what are the logs which are fired when that request was happening. So I think that's unifying that layer across different signals is very interesting.
All right. And another example could be like, let's say there's an instant where a VM or node emitted a log or span, and you found that a span or log to be anomalous. Now you would like to have the screenshot of um, the state of your infra at that point of time. So you ideally, beside a span or a log, you would like to see the infrastructure metrics, how it was looking at that point of time. Was there a spike in CPU usage or memory usage? Was the disk IO fine or not? Right. So these kinds of debugging use cases become a lot more natural when the semantics is unified.
Yeah. So I think, when are we going to see this feature in SigNoz? This would be very interesting to see there.
Right, it would be pretty much soon, maybe a couple of months. But yeah, it is going to be there. We are going to leverage all the semantic conventions, all the correlations of OpenTelemetry that it can offer, and like yeah, so sure we are going to do that.
Or maybe next launch week we'll do with that. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think
good
as you
idea.
mentioned, but as you mentioned, you have been working this space for some time. Observability is uh, near and dear to you, and I know you love this space and like the challenges with come at it. But fundamentally, I think as the world moves more towards digitization and software, and now AI, which is coming up, observability will become critically important.
Mhm.
What do you see as the future here? Like, what are the key things which you are watchful about in observability space, or you are interesting to you? And yeah, give us some color on that.
Right. So I had some experience of machine learning and anomaly detection due to my past experiences with image processing and all. I did some experimentations early on with this logs and observability data to detect some anomalies and all. But all this was before the generation of the new chat GPT and the GPT transformers that can enable different sorts of analytics on top of these logs, right? So that is definitely a space to watch what can be achieved. It does not necessarily have to be everything automatic. Like we do not need to bring out all the insights upfront at the first place. It can have various levels of impact to the users. We can save them time by building out dashboards for them using some automated queries. What we can do more is give them easily accessible links so that they can go to that page and explore. Maybe like let's start off with an alert. Like there should be more and more of you like users starting from alerts and insights section rather than a pre-built section of dashboards of their own, right? Because what we see today in dashboards is something that we have already envisioned and what we have already prepared for and what we have planned to monitor. But all of the miseries that come out on Black Day is not just what we expect, right? so
It's
so we need to
monitoring
be
the
prepared.
unexpected.
Yes, yes. So I would say AI should be helpful in bringing out those anomalies upfront. uh, the user should not move from dashboard 1 to dashboard 2 to dashboard 3 to panel X to panel Y to figure out their eureka moment key. Yeah, this is the region for the downtime or the slowness, right? So this can be like much more smoother uh, than what it is today, and that is an area which I am expecting a lot of work and progress to be done uh, to bring, I would say, uh, the AI to practicality in observability, right? So practical use cases in observability getting solved by AI is one, rather than just having a series of researches and papers. The practical, like the day the SREs come and say, yeah, this is being solved by AI. That is the true moment of triumph for AI in our domain. First of all, uh, there are new scenarios that I can imagine where uh, like users would get more and more out of their observability data going forward. One of them is being, like, I've heard this request from a few of the users using SigNoz also, like how they can attribute or annotate costs of their applications or their existing systems into the observability data. Let's say just they
Mhm.
just come on to SigNoz or any other observability data tool one day, and they want to see which team, which region, which application, or which X, Y, and Z thing is consuming the highest amount of uh, cost of my infra. And the cost is not just of an observability tool, but the infra. Like, let's say, who is putting most of the events in our Kafka? Is it just one application,
Yeah.
or is it everyone combined? Right. Yeah. So somewhere in
Yeah, I
those
think that's
lines, I
the
would kind of.
that's an interesting thing. I think one thing even uh I think any multi-tenant system struggles with is that, hey, like, how much resources each of my tenant consuming,
Yeah.
and we don't have, like, it's very difficult to delineate that, okay, this tenant is taking X amount of CPU, and this tenant is taking Y amount of RAM, right? I think with authority data, especially around treasures, where you can actually request maybe which service is taking how much time, you can sort of get an estimate. I don't think it would be completely be able to say that, okay, this is the amount of dollar which was expend, but at least it would be directionally correct, that out of the five
Right.
tenants, which is taking more, which is taking less. So I think that's an area which I don't think many people have worked on, but would be interesting to see, as especially people are getting more and more cost focused in the current environment. What are you seeing
Yeah.
also in the, we constantly hear about being able to host systems in your own data centers, especially because of privacy, or maybe also because of cost. What are you seeing there? What are your views? How that would evolve?
Yeah, Pranay. Yeah, so interestingly, we have been, and I have been particularly been observant in that direction. Where is the cloud or the SaaS going? Um, it seems like more and more folks, users, or companies, you can say, are getting more aware about the cloud bills that they are spending, and I sense or see some shift in thoughts in going back from cloud to the on-prem uh, days where they can own a data center, they own the VMs, the bare metals, and everything on their own. Uh, First, because of cost. Second, because of privacy, governance, and all these things. I read an interesting article by someone, like it, and it made a lot of sense. Like their workloads were not very, I would say, bursty, and they could easily expect like 2 times to 3 times of their loads in their peak seasons or times. And the cost savings that they could achieve when moving back from cloud to bare metals was like 5x, even after doing over provisionings, right? So the advantage of cloud that we usually imagine is that we just click on a with a click of a buttons, we get these resources up and running, right? So if you don't really need things on click of a button, then probably you might have a better adjustment done by bringing things in house, right?
Yeah, I think
And with that,
DHH from 37 Signals has also been quite
yeah,
vocal about that. They moved their infrastructure from cloud vendor to on premise, and they have been able to save a lot of cost. The other trend here, I think, is the recent Gen AI and LLM movement, which has made people more aware about their data, like where their data resides,
Mhm.
especially because you need your data, and especially for LLM models which are being trained with private data, you need to use your data to train these LLM models to get the best results. And people want to run this in their own infrastructure, and that has made people more aware that okay, you can run things in your own infrastructure, may not be on-premise data centers, but in your own AWS, right? I think so. This is very
Right.
interesting trend. uh yeah, I don't know if you have anything more to add there.
That, like, a very affirmative note on that side too. Like, it's not just 37 signals. I have seen a couple of more blogs and users migrating away from cloud to their own, even I would say not even AWS, their own data centers. So that's also a space to watch out for where the signals is going. And for observability, like, it makes a sense, like if you're not sending all the data away to the SaaS providers where you need to pay for your egress cost and all, right? So if you have a predictable load that an observability tool can handle in your infra, so it makes sense to do the compute at the place of your data and not moving the data nearer to your compute, right?
Hmm. That's really interesting. Yeah, so I think thanks for all the for sharing all the notes. Looks pretty interesting. I think observability is a very interesting space, and looking forward to what cool new stuff we can build together and build it for customers and users. Okay, great chatting. Bye bye.
Yeah, Pranay. Bye bye. Take care.
Hey Vishal, welcome
Hey,
to
Pranay.
SigNoz launch week.
Yeah,
How
it's
are you
great.
feeling today?
We're feeling great here.
Cool, cool. So thanks for joining here, and maybe it would be great if you can quickly introduce yourself to viewers, what you have been working on at SigNoz, and then we can get started.
So, hey everyone, I'm Vishal from SigNoz. I am founding backend engineer. So I was first backend engineer at SigNoz, and the first module at SigNoz that we have worked on was traces. In traces, like we have improved a lot. Like we built the first version and the V0 version, V1 version, and V2 versions. And after working on traces, I have also worked on multiple roles at SigNoz. Like I'm involved in SaaS services and other stuff as well, like from products perspective and
Yeah,
researching with the users and others.
yeah, yeah. I think Vishal has taken multiple roles in the product, and as you was mentioning, traces was one of the first feature we launched because we found that that was one thing where the open source projects were not up to the mark. I think Jaeger was the only product then when we started, and we thought that there was a lot of areas of improvement there. So yeah, even today, lots of people like our Traces product and use it very actively. So thanks, Vishal, for working on that. So you mentioned you have worked on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Take us briefly through on like how has being an early engineer in an open source project been? What were you learning? How was your experience working with the community?
Yeah. So, being an early engineer at a startup is like a very great experience from the learning perspective, and so it's it's more like you are learning on the go while you are executing as well. So you need to be execute like fast at execution as well as fast at learning, and learning new things. That's what I like excel at, and that's where being a startup, it was very helpful. And being in open source startup, that is you can say cherry on top, because at an open source company you learn from the communities, you learn from like even your competitors. Like you are not like limited to yourself, you're learning from everywhere, everyone is open, and it's very, you can say, healthy, uh, healthy community compared to being a closed source company, or at a
Yeah.
closed source world. So SigNoz is like
Yeah.
open source first, everything is like built on top of open source. So
Yeah, I think one unique feature of open source products is that you have a very, like, at least we have a very vibrant community where users ask us a lot of questions, and like our engineers, like for example Vishal has helped a lot of users in actively solving their problems, right? And you get what, like one side of that is that you also get lots of things which you have to do because every user is asking something, and many times those are unique cases. So how has that experience been, like replying to users in a community? And I know you have worked on a lot of, like helped a lot of users get started with SigNoz, especially in the early days when we are like still rough on the edges.
yeah, so that experience was also good. In there, like we get to know how users are thinking, because if you are working on a product, when you're building, you know in and out of the product. When users comes to you, you get to know, okay, this thing which we built when we were building, and we thought that like it's very easy to understand for the user, but then user tells you, no, I how to do this. And then you have to be very humble. Okay, this was our kind of improvement where we can improve the product, as well as sometimes even we learn from the users, because SigNoz, we learn like what are the different architectures which people are deploying, kind of monitoring and using SigNoz for. So
Yeah.
it's been very good experience.
So, what have you been working on lately? What are the features you are gonna show us today?
So recently, I've been working on API management. So we had like PAT tokens, you can say personal access tokens, were already existing with SigNoz. We had some documentation as well, but users has to mail us that they want a PAT token, and then we used to like reply them with a token of their own, and then it was not easy to manage. So users has to mail us, and like initially we in the V0 version we wanted to see how users are using it and is it even needed. So being a startup, that's how generally we build features. We see engagement from our community and users, and then we like build the V1 or V2 versions. So we have worked in the first version of API management, and that's what I'm going to show you today.
Got it. So maybe before you start, like doing the demo, walk us through like why is it important? Why were users asking uh, for this? What are the use cases they are trying to solve?
So users wanted API management, uh, because API management can be like APIs can have viewer access, editor access, admin access, different access levels, and so each user can have an own API key as well. So all those things, when that's why like API management was needed. Why API was needed? Is it because users were trying to use SigNoz, like the data which was stored in SigNoz, to like export it and export the data and then do some custom stuff. So one of the use case which one user explained to us was that they wanted to correlate business metrics with the data, with the
Mhm.
observability data. So there they because they had some business metrics with Mixpanel and some other analytics product, and they were using their API to fetch some data, and then in business meetings or like company wide all hands, they wanted to show how improving the latency of so and so APIs or so and so servers, uh, improved their business metrics, how it impacted the business metrics. So all those
Mhm.
things, like that was one of the use case. Other use cases were like they wanted to trigger some kind of custom alerts, or some they had their own logics, which were not non-standard way of creating alerts or something like that. And that's how APIs like the PAT tokens were useful, because they can use the API keys to create those alerts or like fetch the data, something like that.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think we have seen many users trying to correlate the infra level data which we have, or already data which we have, with what's happening in the product and business, right? Because if you think about it more broadly, technology is there to serve what product is being built or what the business needs, right? So in a way, we should be able to much tightly correlate. For example, a simple example could be, hey, I have a email or e-commerce product, and we see that in the payment page there is an increase in drop, right? Like more people are dropping out of the conversion, like they came to the payment page but didn't convert, or like didn't end up paying. One area where observability data can help there is, if there are, can we see if there are any errors coming out of that page, right? Or if the latency of that page getting loaded is slow or high, and the page is loading slowly, and hence the customers are not paying. So I think this is a very interesting area of opportunity, and maybe we will take this up in the future versions of SigNoz, where
Yeah.
users should be able to more easily correlate what's happening in the business or the product, and tightly couple with what's happening in the engineering, right? Because today I think these are like two silos which people don't are not able to easily correlate, but there's a huge opportunity there to do things there. And I guess that's something which you have heard from your the community, that they are trying to use it for.
Yes, yes. So that's the feedback of our early users, because we are saying them early users because it was not very easy to access the token and use it. Now we have made it easier. So now we would have a greater community, and we would, I think, see more use cases which we have not even thought of. Because
Yeah,
API, the PAT API has an you can say is extremely powerful, because the users can write scripts and do anything with that, anything with the data. So
interesting.
that's why I'm very hopeful that our users, SigNoz users, will find it very helpful to use the
Got it.
patterns.
Do you want to walk through like how the feature looks, how people can start playing around with it?
Yeah, sure. Uh, yeah. So let's get started now. So here's the page of API key management. It's just a simple page where you can, how you can like search the APIs. You can create APIs and then copy the token, and then just use those tokens to send request to SigNoz. So something like this. So let's see. Let's create a new token. Let's name it uh, test launch day API, and let's keep it editor level, and let's name it editor. And if I keep it editor level, and expiration can be 1 week, 1 day. So let's keep it 1 week. So API is created, and now I can use this API. So here you can see the expiration date as well, and then I can just copy and close the API. We can edit the APIs as well. So while we only allow editing of role and name of the API, so we can change the API from editor to, let's say, viewer, rename as well, and then you can see the latest API. So here we also show when the API was last used and what is the level. So currently viewer level, editor level, admin level. So those are the APIs. So let me show you an example of fetching some logs based on the APIs. So logs, let's say paste the API. So here, like, you have to keep the authorization as API key, and just add a key value pair, and it's added to header. So you can add it here as well directly, or you can go by the authorization way.
Vishal, can you explain also briefly what you are trying to do? I see API v3 query range. Like, what does that give, and like why you're trying to hit that API?
So I'm trying to fetch the this so from the query range. So query range is the API where we can query the like logs, traces, and metrics data of SigNoz, and that is explained well in our documentation. So we have API key document, the API documentation, where what's the payload and other stuff. So I won't go into details of this stuff. These are available on our website. But here, like, to use this API, we have to authorize that API, and we can use this personal access token we just created with API management tool. And here, like, if we add the personal access token and we create a request, it will respond back with the logs, or we can say in a specific format. So that format is like a very specific format which is well explained in our documentation, like what is the response format and other stuff. So here's a sample payload and the response as well. So we have this, and so this was a one of the example. So we have different levels as well, or levels of the role based APIs. So here
Mhm.
currently this API is viewer level. Okay, and let me show you an example where if a viewer level cannot create alerts. So let me try to create a alert with this API and see the response. So if you see, the API is accessible only to admins and editor. And let me just update this API key to, let's say, editor level, and then try again. So this time, like, this alert got created. Even the alert payload is uh, is defined according to the documentation that we have. So users can easily create alerts.
So can
Users can
this?
easily create log.
Hmm.
You can say fetch logs, traces, or any kind of metrics. Even users can fetch the list of alerts. So anything which user can do on UI that can be done programmatically by using the pet tokens based on
Interesting.
the roles as well.
Interesting. So can users also get alerts, like current alerts which are set? Can they programmatically create alerts using this API?
Yeah. So yeah, they can. This example was for programmatically creating alert, and they can fetch the alert. They can fetch like which alerts are firing state as well.
Hmm.
And then let's say they want to act on it. So let's say they have an so in Kubernetes we have HPA, which scales the number of nodes based on some metrics like uh, so these metrics are like CPU and memory generally. So here, let's say user wants to fetch the number of active users who are currently using product, and they know that those users will be moving to another funnel, so you can say another API, and they are expecting a spike. So our users can actually use alert, like fetch alerts of number of users who are currently active on their website or some on single API, and they can increase the resources for Kubernetes or their VMs or something like that. So that was one of the example, like, which users can do.
Interesting. So this could, in fact, be used for auto remediation, right? For example, if you
Yeah,
see some memory getting, say, reaching 90%, right? And people can automatically spin up new pods or add new nodes to a Kubernetes clusters. Can this be done through this API?
yeah, this can be done through this API as well.
Hmm. Interesting. Got it.
So we have a we can let me also show you search. Let's say you want to only search like viewer which has the keyword. So this search is the API key name, and here I search, and here you can copy the API key as well, and you
Got
can
it.
delete the key as well. After you delete, like, that API becomes invalid and cannot be used again. Yeah,
So this can be
unauthorized.
become very powerful, right? Like you can use this programmatic access, I think, as you mentioned, to get business like correlate between business data and engineering data. You can use these APIs to do
Auto
auto
remediation.
remediation by creating scripts which can uh, like spin up new resources and help resolve the issue. What
Yes.
else do you think are the use cases here, or like what is in pipeline for this feature next? Like what?
So another use case which I can think of is that users. Uh, so currently, if you see, SigNoz has different views, or you can say different charts which are available. But let's say user wants a totally different specific use case. So let's say they are running some load test or something, or they have some kind of event-based systems. So in those cases, those if there is a non-standard way which neither SigNoz nor any other tool supports, those non-standard data can be you can say fetched and represented as you like, using some kind of, you can say,
Hmm,
plotting library, or uh, writing some scripts in Python or any other language.
got it.
Even they can you can say extract out the data in Google Sheets, because business metrics are generally not available in case of, you can say, we cannot insert to SigNoz or observability system, something like that.
Got it. Cool. So thanks for sharing this demo, and thanks for building this feature. Maybe next it would be great to see a quick demo of like how users can use this to maybe get CSV data and correlate with business data. So yeah, maybe we'll see that in the next view.
Yes. Yeah. Thank
Cool.
you,
See
everyone.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye bye.
See you. Bye.
Hey Chitransh, welcome
Hi
to SigNoz
Pranav.
Launch Week.
Thank you. How are you?
I am good. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good.
Cool. Excited. Uh,
Mm.
Maybe we can start with a quick intro about yourself, what you work on, what your background has been.
Yeah. So I am working on documentation and SaaS onboarding at SigNoz. And I've been into tech stuff for quite some time, and I've worked with developers for some time now. So yeah, I have been working on developer experience majorly for the last couple of years, and that is something that is of good interest to me. Yeah, that's about me.
Why? What is interesting about developer experience, or what you talked about? You worked on onboarding. Why does it interest you?
Yeah, so about developers, I have realized that developers are a very different breed of people. They work very differently than normal humans. Because I mean, having a lot of friends who have been into development and having worked on projects which involved a lot of development, I realized that the thought process of developers is a bit different than what a normal person would think of. So, I mean, that kind of got my interest. And onboarding specifically, I feel, especially since I'm working in SigNoz, which is a developer tool product, I feel it's a very crucial thing. Uh, from what I have read and experienced, onboarding in itself is a product. Onboarding and documentation itself is a product for a developer tooling company, because uh, generally the customers or the users, they don't have a preference of getting into calls to solve their problems. So the first thing that they would probably go for is looking at the documentation and creating a judgment out of it. So from what I have learned, developers, and since I have also worked into some form of development, I would really want my documentation. Like if I go to a product, I'll actually judge that product based on the documentation. If it solves
Yeah.
my problem like in say 3-4 steps, I'll be really happy because it worked for me and I don't have to invest a lot of time there, right? So uh, that is one thing with onboarding, I feel, uh,
Yeah,
is
basically developers have very less amount time to make a judgment. If you think about it, they give you 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Generally, they would have come to you with a problem in mind to solve, and they will think that, hey, let's try this product. If they're able to solve that problem in that 30 to 45 minutes, they are very happy. And then you get the permission to get more time from them. Otherwise, they move on to the next product, right?
yeah,
And the other key point which you mentioned is also very interesting. As being developer myself, I don't like to get on calls a lot. And it also boils down to the way developers work, right? So the way developer works is is that you need a lot of context to get started. I think there's a Paul Graham essay also on this, that you need long chunks of time to get started, and you need the initial 1 hour to just get onboarded. So you can't get anything done in say 1 hour time frame, right? You will take 20 minutes to just set up your system, start understanding where you have been in the process of solving a problem, and then you solve that problem, right? Which is very different from how for example somebody in marketing or somebody in sales works, right? Because they can block their day in blocks of 30 minutes very easily, and each 30 minute is 1 unit of work. While
mm,
for a developer, a 30 minute may be zero, but if you give him 5 hours, some work gets done, right? So I think it also boils down to the way developers work and the mechanisms on of there that they need longer
yeah.
time to get started.
They need
Cool.
more
So
focus hours, I guess. They need more focus space to just get the work done, right?
yeah. So you mentioned that you focus a lot on onboarding for SaaS users, and I think we will talk more about that. So
Mhm.
we have recently launched a new onboarding flow for SaaS users. What steps do you follow, or what is the process you follow to ensure that you have a good onboarding? What's the thought process or the process goes behind it?
Yeah. So I mean, for us specifically, what I keep in mind is it's very simple. Fundamentally, onboarding is a very like user-centric process. Okay, so it's the first thing that any user that is coming to your product will see. So it's a very crucial process, and two things fundamentally we keep in mind while like thinking of onboarding. The first thing is that it should be like it should sort out the use case that the particular person is coming for. So if say for example a person is coming on the onboarding page of SigNoz, we would want that they should be able to see their use case at the first glance, right? And second thing is, which is I think the most crucial thing, they should be able to send their data to SigNoz, right? They should be able, like once they have the use case right in front of it, they should be easily able to get their data into SigNoz so that they can do some form of like whatever they want to do with that data or visualization with the data easily, right? So these two things I feel are fundamentally uh, what drives the onboarding. So we just try to focus on these two things.
Got it. And any tactics or sort of any specific things which you use to ensure that, or like
Yeah.
any tips here?
Yeah. So what we have tried is we have tried to bifurcate. So we have created flows for every use case, and we have tried to bifurcate each flow into simple steps that the user can follow. And each step is kind of a step in itself. If you do one step, you can move on to the second, third, fourth, right? So you don't have to think of the next step or the previous step. It's kind of isolated in the sense that you follow the step one and you move to
Mm.
step two, then you move to step three, and then bam, you have your data running in SigNoz, right? So that is one thing that we have followed, like dividing the things into multiple steps so that you have more a user coming into solve their use case, they have more clarity about, okay, these are the 6 or 5 steps I have to follow, and yeah, I'll get the data in. Secondly, we have tried to make things very easy, like if there is some environment variable that they have to use in terms of environment variable that is dependent on SigNoz, we have made it pre-filled in the code snippets, so they don't have to run to their settings to get
Yeah.
that environment variable. They can just copy the code and just put it out in the file and run it.
Got it. So
So
basically
and
make it as much as copy pastable as possible.
yeah,
So you
yeah,
can just
yeah,
do copy paste, and it should just work.
right, right.
Got it. Cool. So show us what you have been working on. Maybe take us through a few use cases which you think are interesting.
Sure. Let me open up my tab. So can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is how our onboarding looks like. We have the 3 major use cases right now. So if you want to monitor your application logs or infrastructure, I'll go through each of these and show you some of the flows that we already have. So say if I select application monitoring, and once you get in, you get these options for different languages that your service is running on. So say if I have a Python app running and I want to monitor that application, I'll just select Python. I'll put in my Python app name, test, or maybe Python app, and I'll select my framework. Say if my app is running in maybe say Flask, right? If I have a Flask app, I'll just select the framework. So these are some of the frameworks that we have: Django, Fast API, Flask, Falcon. But if you don't see the framework in your list, you can always choose the others option for any other framework apart from these, right? So once I have my service name and framework selected, I'll just move on to the next steps. So here we get to like select the environment that our application is running in. So if say if we have a Kubernetes cluster running in, right, we can just go and select the Kubernetes environment. One thing I just want like small thing I wanted to point out is if you just select Kubernetes, you'll get all like number of steps that are needed for it. If you select let's say Linux, you'll get the number of steps here, and like steps for each of these are a bit different, so that gets changed automatically when you select the environment. So say if we select Kubernetes, right? So this is divided into like easy steps that you can follow. So the first step would be to install the OTel collector or OpenTelemetry collector in your Kubernetes infra. This can be easily done by the Helm chart that is created by SigNoz. So you can just install the Helm chart into SigNoz following these steps. And the thing that I mentioned earlier, so as you can see, these ingestion keys and say the region, these are environment variables which are being auto-filled uh, for your instance or for the user's instance. So the user don't have to like fill these values. and obviously some variables like the cluster name that the user will have to fill up. So once we set up the OTel collector here, right, we go to the instrumentation step, which is a pretty like a standard way of getting the telemetry data. So you just instrument your application, you install your OpenTelemetry dependencies, and you just add automatic instrumentation to your application. So these steps are needed to uh, get telemetry data from your application. Once you set that up, you can just go and run your application. So, uh, like you saw, right? We named our application. So our application name was Test Python App. So this gets autofilled again here, and you get the run command from say this or whatever run command you're using, and once you just like copy this code snippet and paste it, say if you're running it in your terminal, then you should like after running that step you should like see a status with a green tick mark if data is coming in. And once you are done, you can go to this services tab and you'll see your application here, right? So uh, I mean, this is one environment that we have for Flask, Python Flask. Another environment we have is a Linux one, right? So in this we have two ways. If you want to just really quickly send data to SigNoz, data from your application to SigNoz, you can just follow the quick start instructions, which uses the OpenTelemetry SDKs. And if you want better control over the data that you're sending, you can use the recommended step method, which uses the OpenTelemetry collector. So I'll just walk you through.
What do you
Yeah.
mean by more control using the
So-
OpenTelemetry collector?
So with the OpenTelemetry SDK, you generally get less control over what data you are sending in, right? You can't particularly select what kind of data you're sending, but if you use a OpenTelemetry collector, I'll show you that we have a config file that we can create, wherein we can add or remove certain things, like we can add more. You can say receivers here, and you can get in, or you can add, like if you're sending logs, you can filter out logs using this collector config. So yeah, I mean, you can have a better overall control of what you're sending to SigNoz.
Yeah, I think if you are sending metrics and logs,
Yeah,
you anyways need to install a collector at your
yeah,
host
yeah,
level.
yeah.
So if you just if you're also looking to do metrics and logs, maybe OpenTelemetry collector
Collector.
makes more sense. While if you're
Yeah,
just trying to see by sending data and see if the data is coming to SigNoz and understand how the platform works, quick start may be the easier way. I
right.
think the other key thing also is that in OpenTelemetry collector, as you mentioned, Chitransh, that you can play with the config file. And in
Yeah,
the config file, you can add multiple receivers. You can also do filtering of processors. For example, OpenTelemetry collector, you can add processors there, and one of the processors is say filtering processor where you want to remove PII data, right? So you can do stuff like that, which is not possible if you just send via SDK
right,
directly.
right. So, like you mentioned, Ranas, like if we select the open telemetry collector method or the recommended step, we get these instructions where we just download the OTel collector using these commands, and you get the config file that we were talking about, right? So you have the structure of the config file looks like this. You have the receivers, you have the processors, then you have the exporters, right? And you can like play around with the file. And here also, like you get your access token and everything pre-filled, so you can just copy paste this file directly. and modify it according to your needs, right? And like just like the Kubernetes one, we have similar steps for instrumentation and running the application. And then once we are done, we get this test connection step again. And if all goes well, there should be a green tick mark coming here, and we should have our service in the services page at SigNoz.
Got it. Got it. So
This
this
was
is
about
APM. Yeah.
right, right. So let me show you some flows for logs. So logs right now, these are the things that we have in our onboarding flow. So let's say if we have a Kubernetes cluster, right, and we want to have the Kubernetes pod logs, right? So this is a very simple process. All you have to do is this just add this Helm chart into your Kubernetes cluster. So just add this repository, the SigNoz Helm chart repository into your Kubernetes cluster using these commands. Once you do that, you should see your Kubernetes pod logs coming into SigNoz log section. So if you go here in the log section, you'll see the data coming in. So this is one of the use case where like for collecting logs. So if you have Kubernetes pod logs, you can use that. A lot of times people have their application logs in a log file. So this tile or this way, and this is the step that you can use to collect the application logs from a log file. So say if we have a Linux environment, right? Uh, the basic step is just to again like you mentioned, Pranay, right? To collect logs, we'll use the OTel collector here, right, and run the collector. The crucial step here is to add something called a file log receiver in our config file. So say if we are writing our logs to a file called app.log, uh, then to collect those logs, we'll have to like read those logs via the file log receiver. uh, Once we do that, we will have to like restart the and one more crucial thing is once you add the receiver, you have to add the receiver in the pipeline as well so that the data gets sent to SigNoz. Once you do that, you just restart the OTel collector that we set up, and we should be able to see the logs coming in the log section of
Yeah.
so
So maybe just to add on to that, the file pipeline thing which is shown here, right? For example, here in the logs, we see that there's a receivers and then processor and exporter. Basically, we are creating a data pipeline here for each type of signal. For example, logs is one type of signal, and you're kind of saying that okay, you can receive data from these formats either through a file log receiver or data being directly received via OTLP. You pass that through the batch processor, and then it is exported in the OTLP format. So any other system which understand OTLP data would be able to understand it. So in a way, OpenTelemetry collector also acts as a data pipeline, which you can configure to receive data, process it in different way, and export in a desired format.
right, right. So this was another category of, or you can say another way where you can how you can send logs. Another different category would be, say, if we have a platform like Vercel and you want to send logs from Vercel to SigNoz. So if you have like a Vercel Pro or Enterprise account, you will have something called a log drain, right? And you can just set up log drains inside the settings, and just put in the SigNoz ingestion endpoint along with your ingestion key, and this will probably use this will send the logs via HTTP to SigNoz, and you should be able to see your Vercel logs in SigNoz. So, I mean, what I meant by HTTP was this thing. So, Vercel kind of uses this way of sending logs. So, if you have, I think my screen froze. Yeah. So the Vercel method also uses kind of this method to send logs over to SigNoz, right? Think, yeah, I mean, uh, this is another way. Like if you ever want to send your logs over to SigNoz, you can use HTTP for that. uh, where you just define a payload structure. So uh, this there is a standard data model called the hotel log data model, right? And SigNoz uses that as well. So this is the structure for the payload. You just structure your log data in this format, and then you can just say if this is a sample log line, you can just send it over using a curl request or to SigNoz. So if say a log look like this, we can run this sample curl request, and this log line would basically be sent to uh, SigNoz, and this can be viewed in the SigNoz dashboard. And this one small thing about this curl request specifically, like if you don't mention timestamp, it will take the timestamp when your log data was sent. So yeah, this is about logs. So yeah, I mean, these were some categories of logs that you can try sending from your application to SigNoz. The last one that we have right now is you can also monitor your infrastructure on SigNoz. So say if you have Kubernetes inframetrics, the steps for this are the same as if you had are the same as the Kubernetes pod logs. So you just install the Helm chart, run this command, and you should see your matrices coming in
So
directly.
this will get us metrics like number of Kubernetes pods, number of
Yeah.
containers, all those
Yes.
metrics will come, and also memory and CPU being used by each of the Kubernetes containers.
Right. Right.
Are these metrics a part of this?
Yeah, Pranay. So basically, there are multiple matrices that we can monitor. So what after you set up, like after you install the Helm chart into your Kubernetes infra, you can like just import a dashboard. So we have these dashboards created, different kind of dashboards created for Kubernetes, which the user can use to like get the different categories of matrices that they're looking for. So the matrices that you mentioned are part of those dashboards as well.
Got it.
So this was about Kubernetes, and for host matrices, which are the environment level matrices, so like the CPU, the memory, these kind of matrices, you can monitor using the host metrics section. So for the host metrics, we use something called the host metrics receiver, which you can see here in the config file. So again, we use the hotel collector here for collecting the matrices. So as you can see, like matrices like CPU, disk, load, file system, or the processes, system IO processes, right, IO errors. These kind of matrices can be monitored using the host metrics receiver, uh, right? And if you want to read more about the different kind of receivers, there is a detailed GitHub repository about the different receiver that hotel provides. So that would be a good place for that. And yeah, you just run the hotel collector after you have created this config, and then import the dashboard. So if you just check out this link, uh, in the onboarding, you'll see that there's something called a host metrics dashboard, or host metrics is a variable dashboard. You just import this dashboard. Let me show you once how you can import a dashboard. If you go to a dashboard section, you can just import and paste the JSON here itself. Once you load the JSON, you should see a dashboard. Like, say, for example, I'm not sure if it's working, but this is how the dashboard would look like. So if you have your service set up and it's running, you should be able to see such data here itself after you import the dashboard. So, I mean, this is majorly about the onboarding. So right now we have three sections that we are focusing on for the onboarding, and yeah, these are the use cases that we have.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So seems pretty interesting. I
Yeah.
hope users should be able to start with SigNoz much easily with that.
Yeah.
What's upcoming here? What's the new things which you're working on now for onboarding, and
Yeah.
what can we expect from in the next launch week?
So right now I am focused on creating more including more and more use cases into onboarding. One thing that I'm working on right now is the having a specific section for AWS, because we have seen that a lot of people use the cloud services. So we are planning on having a AWS section right in front of APM logs and infra section. Apart from that, we are working. I think you guys already know it now. We are working on integrations. So integrations will also become part of the onboarding process. And like the dashboards I mentioned, right? We also plan on having some pre-built dashboards that could cover up a lot of use cases or the common use cases that a user is looking for. Yeah, these are some of the things that I look forward to working on really soon.
Cool. Thanks for sharing all this, Chitransh, and look forward to see more features from you in the coming days.
Thank you so much, Prana.
Cool. Bye bye. Have a great day.
Bye bye.